should have been recording. Okay. Okay, so now I'm recording. Okay, so again, chapter quizzes are all open until May 10th. The final exam will open May 11th and close the 13th. And we're going to talk about the review. So I'm going to go to that PowerPoint now. Okay, and we're going to share that. So let's see here. Let's see if I can get to the right spot. That is not the right spot. Okay, hold on. There's the right spot. Okay, so the final exam will be 100 points. That's about 10% of the final grade, maybe a little bit more. The questions will be multiple choice or true false. There will be one essay question. As I said, the multiple choice and true false questions will come from previous exams and from the chapter quizzes. There probably won't be that many new questions. Oops, hold on. Did someone show up in there? I don't know. I don't know.
Hey, Mr. Nowicki.
Yeah.
I can't find the brain don't die one on here. All I see is the muscles one.
That one that I showed Ariel, that's it.
Like, it's not on here. Like, I looked at every single one.
No, that's it. Hold on. Okay, so let's stop this and we'll go back.
Sorry, I just want to make sure
okay.
I find it.
Where was it? That's this.
Mr. Nowicki, I just looked at mine too to see if I could find it again, and I can't find it on there.
Okay, so it should be in this box here. It says materials for the week that begin on April 6th. It's the brain, don't die young, or don't die young, the brain.
It's not posted though.
It's posted. Not.
It is posted. Uh-oh, wait, hold on. Hold on. Does anything show up now?
Let me refresh my page.
So much happens.
I know.
Okay. Yes?
Yes, now I see it.
Okay. So then, is that the second quiz or the third quiz? What quiz is that? Shoot. I'll give you an extra attempt here. Okay, I will give an extra. Is that the first muscle lab quiz or the second one?
It's the second one.
Okay, so I'll get an extra attempt. I won't be able to do it now, but I can do that. Okay, so now I have to go back. Thank you, Karen.
Yep.
Okay, so where was I? There? This thing? Okay, so let's go there. Okay, so let's see. So 100 points. Hold on. Why is it not doing this? Manage participants. Okay. All right. I have to go back. Okay. Okay. So I'm thinking people are in there. Can I just move this? Do you see the participants thing? Maybe not. Okay. Okay, so does anybody see a guy with a big head?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we're back to talking about the final exam. Okay, so about 10% of your final grade will be this final exam. It's got multiple choice, true, false questions, and one essay question. I'll go over the essay today if there's a chance. Otherwise, I'll do that Friday. Mostly it will be questions that have been somewhere before. Okay, so did I talk about distributed review? Distributed review means lots of short study sessions frequently over the next week. That your best bet is to study 15 minutes at a time and then take a break and then come back. In case we can't study with partners, but you can still write, make notes, make review sheets, do self-quizzing. The key thing is to plan short study sessions and to take breaks. That's the best way to remember stuff, and the best way to study for an exam. Okay, really good materials to use are chapter summaries, old exams, vocabulary lists that might be on the study guides or that were on the Moodle kind of PowerPoints that you can get there. But to do those kinds of things, look over old quizzes. It's frequent short study sessions is the best way to study. We know this from studying memory. Okay. So the important topics for the final exam, they come from a variety of places. They're the same things that we emphasize the first time through. So here's a list of important topics: homeostasis, cells, skin functions, skeletal system functions, bone growth and development, calcium homeostasis, the types of joints, particularly synovial joints, the general functions of the muscular system, muscle cells, the histology of skeletal muscle, how muscle contraction works, that's the physiology, the general organization of the nervous system, general functions of the nervous system, how neurons work with membrane potentials and synapses, neurotransmitters, brain regions and function, eye and ear physiology, autonomic nervous system, and neurological exam. Okay, those are the kind of really big important topics. You know, there's stuff that's probably less important. Things like anatomical positions, the relative positions, you know, some of that might show up. I'm probably not going to ask you about organ systems so much, other than what, you know, the ones that we studied in detail. Same with body chemistry. I'm not going to, you know, you might have to know about organic chemicals in various organs. What is collagen, something like that, what's melanin, but I'm not going to ask you specifically about carbohydrates, proteins, and things like that. You know, I'm not going to ask you for about tissue ID, but you might have to know something about the general tissue types in the organ systems. Even less important, I'm not going to ask you basic chemistry. I'm not going to ask you to ID tissues. I won't ask you to name this bone or that bone or what type of joint that is. Nothing about specific muscles. That stuff I won't ask on the final. That, you know, some of this we had in the lab, and the next lab exam would have had a lot of muscle ID, but we're going to kind of skip over that. So that don't spend a lot of time on those chapters or anything like that. So out of the important topics, so homeostasis, you know, we try and inside our body, small internal fluctuations are okay. Major fluctuations would be bad. And so we have these systems for kind of keeping things stable. It's negative feedback. Cells only function well under a narrow range of conditions. So that's why we maintain homeostasis. Okay, the primary way we do that is with negative feedback systems. Okay, a negative feedback system is a control system. You sense change, okay, compare the change to the normal range at the control center, and then you initiate action by things that oppose the change. Okay, those are the effectors. Okay, and so this is the thermostat in your house, works like that. Okay, your thermostat, actually heat probably had to go on last night because it got cold outside. The thermostat detects the falling temperature and says, well, the temperature is below the set point, and so it turns on the furnace. The furnace raises the temperature back into the okay range, and then the thing turns off. Okay, we have the same thing in our brain. The hypothalamus is our little, you know, that's where our set point is located, and information on body temperature comes into the hypothalamus, and if it's too low, the hypothalamus will initiate changes. Okay? And those changes happen largely at the skin, but it may include shivering. So that's what a negative feedback system does, opposes change. I'll ask you about that for sure. Okay. Okay, we talk a lot about cells in anatomy and physiology. Everything is made up of cells. Okay, cells are alive. They make everything. So it always comes down to what kind of cell is there, what is that cell doing? So whether it's epithelial tissue like the skin, whether it's connective tissue like the skeletal system, we wind up talking about cells, okay? And so all cells have a membrane. All cells contain a nucleus with DNA. The DNA directs the production of proteins at the ribosomes. All cells need energy, so they usually have mitochondria. They can change shape and move, so they have a cytoskeleton. That's probably the basic stuff about cells. You know, there'll be something about DNA, there'll be something about mitochondria, you know, but it'll probably be in the context of muscle cells or skin cells or something like that. Just ask a question if we're going, that's perfectly okay. You know, if you want to chat a question, that's fine too. Oops, shoot, what did I do there? I don't know. Okay, so the skin, the upper layer of the skin, this is the epidermis. Okay, it's just packed cells made up of epithelial tissue. The bottom layer here is the stratum germinativum or stratum basale. Okay, that's where mitosis occurs. The other cells are just moving up, and then they get here. They're flat and dead. They contain lots of keratin. You know, and so that's the epidermis. No blood vessels, no nerve cells in there, no muscle in there. It's just epithelial cells. Okay, let's see. Underneath, so here's epidermis here. Underneath this is dermis. The dermis is dense fibrous connective tissue, mostly collagen fibers. Lots of blood vessels there. Lots of other things like glands. There's a sweat gland. There's a hair follicle. These are receptor cells for touch receptors. There's nerve cells going in there. Lots of other structures in the dermis. The dermis is usually thicker than the epidermis, usually much thicker. Below that is subcutaneous. Anybody have any questions about skin? Good on skin? Skin's okay? Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's do that. Let's put this up here. Was it there? Oh, dang it. Can anybody see the chat thing in my screen? Yes, no? Give me a thumbs up. Can you hear me still? I have no idea. Yes, okay, so Ariel can hear. Okay, so I'm going to continue going. Okay, all right. So skin functions, generally, this is an important thing. Protect against ultraviolet light, against water loss, abrasion, and infection. The skin plays a big role in homeostasis because it's our main organ for interacting for temperature loss. And so we can conserve temperature by changing blood flow to the skin. We can conserve or increase heat loss by affecting the production of perspiration. So that's a really big thing. The skin also does some excretion. It produces vitamin D. The skin has sensory stuff. We didn't really talk about that because we didn't get to the senses yet, but those are big things that the skin does. So this is a kind of a general slide that might contain some important information. Okay, skeletal system, general functions. It supports, it protects organs, it allows for movement and growth. It's involved in the storage of calcium and phosphate, so mineral storage. And for calcium homeostasis, the skeleton is really important. It also stores fat and it produces blood cells. I kind of like this, with skeleton, without skeleton. Okay. I won't ask you to identify individual bones, but I might ask you about the parts of a bone. The shaft, that's the name of the diaphysis, or the name of the shaft is the diaphysis. The name of the head of a bone is the epiphysis, that's the anatomical name. The membrane that covers the bone is the periosteum. The epiphysis is covered by articular cartilage that's in a joint. There's a hollow cavity that's filled with yellow marrow. At the epiphysis, the inside of the bone is filled with red marrow. There's compact bone, spongy bone. Growing areas have this epiphyseal disc. In a non-growing bone, that becomes an epiphyseal line. You should be familiar with the parts of a long bone. I might ask that. The two different types of bone, cartilage bone versus membrane bone, form in different ways. Cartilage bones form as a cartilage model, and then they have this cartilage pad, that's the epiphyseal plate or disc, where growth and length occurs. You know, the cells that produce new bone are osteoblasts. For growth and length, you need chondroblasts or chondrocytes present in that place there. You should kind of know the two types of bone formation. In calcium homeostasis, there are two hormones, calcitonin, and the other hormone is parathyroid hormone. And in parathyroid hormone is released whenever calcium levels fall too low, and it causes the release of calcium from bone because it wants to increase calcium levels in the blood. In the long term, it'll also decrease or increase calcium uptake in the intestines and decrease calcium loss in the urine. And so these things are kind of long-term things, but in the immediate term, it causes calcium loss from the bone. This causes calcium levels to rise so that calcium gets back to normal. If calcium levels are high enough, they're above what they should be, the thyroid gland releases calcitonin, and that will cause calcium storage in the bone, so you'll get new bone matrix. Okay, at the same time, it'll decrease calcium uptake in the intestine, and it'll allow calcium to be excreted from the urine. Okay, calcium has other physiological roles. It's really important for muscles like skeletal muscles and cardiac muscle. It's important for nerve cells. It's important for as a cofactor for several enzymes. Calcium levels in the blood are what's crucial. And so that's why we have this system. This is really important. The muscle system. Okay, again, general functions, body movement, posture, respiration, produce heat, communication. It's needed for the function of organs and blood vessels to distribute blood flow. We need muscles to do things. Here, this is just showing facial expressions, communication. This is skeletal muscle activity. Okay, important part of this is muscle cells. These are specialized cells. Specialized cells that are involved in contraction. They all can contract. They're filled with special proteins. These are the myofilaments, and together they form the myofibrils. And so this is actin and myosin. These things can contract. They have a specialized membrane that can do this action potential stuff. They have specialized regions where they can interact with muscle cells, the neuromuscular junction. Action potentials travel down into transverse tubules, okay, and that's going to stimulate a modified endoplasmic reticulum, which we call the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, and they also usually have lots of mitochondria, most muscle cells. Okay, so the contraction is actin and myosin are the two filaments. This depends on having ATP and calcium present, and that allows these myosins to form cross bridges with the actin. Let's see. Okay, let's go down here. Whoops. You know, just blurt out questions if you have them. Okay, so then we talked about energy use for muscle contraction. Okay, there's two ways we can get it: through aerobic metabolism. Okay, those cells that are specialized to do that have lots of mitochondria and blood vessels. They store oxygen with a protein called myoglobin right in the muscle, and they can use glucose or fat for energy. Okay, these are referred to as aerobic muscles or endurance type muscles. They're not quite as fast as other types of muscles, but they can go for a long time. They don't fatigue. Anaerobic muscles or sprinting muscles like these guys here, these produce ATP at a faster rate, but they can only use glucose as a source of energy. And because they only partially break glucose down to lactic acid, these muscles fatigue, but they're stronger and faster than the other muscles. And so if you train for strength or sprinting, like these guys, like a power activity, like weightlifting or something like that, you build anaerobic capacity, and your muscles are likely to fatigue, but they'll be stronger. Okay. All right, so then sensory, nervous and sensory stuff. The nervous system carries sensory input, carries motor control that goes to muscles and glands, and then it does integration, which might do homeostatic type activities and mental activities like language and speech, things like that, interpreting that, or judgment. Those are integration type activities. So sensory, motor, and integration. And then the nervous system can be divided into central nervous system, which is primarily where the integration occurs, and then peripheral nervous system, which carries sensory and motor, and so doing stuff there. So we talked again, central and peripheral nervous system. There's just a picture of it. Okay. And then we talked about how nervous system cells function, the neurons. They are charged, so they have this resting potential of charged ions, so sodium and potassium. And then they can go through a rapid action potential, which is a charge swing involving the opening of ion channels. Okay. Then to signal other cells, they have a synapse, and at the synapse they release neurotransmitters from little vesicles, and these vesicles are going to allow these neurotransmitters to leave, and they'll go across and they'll bind to receptors on other cells, and those other cells will then become active depending upon what those receptors do. Okay, then we talked about various divisions of the nervous system, the anatomical regions. I'd expect you to know the cerebrum, the hemispheres, the lobes of the cortex, the underlying areas of white matter. Know these regions: the diencephalon, the brainstem, and the cerebellum. Okay, and we should be able to localize functions there. This is a frontal section up here and over here. This is all cerebrum. This right here, this central area, that's thalamus. We can't really see brainstem here because that would be farther posterior. Okay, so let's go here. Cortical areas, here's a lateral view. Here's the frontal, parietal, temporal, and then occipital back here. And we can localize area. This is the motor speech area, primary motor cortex, premotor area, and prefrontal area. Here's these primary somatosensory cortex, the association areas. Here's the general interpretation or Wernicke's area. Here's temporal lobe areas here. There will be some taste areas there, some hearing areas there, and here's the visual cortex. Frontal areas include the executive function areas with working memory, thoughts, judgments, impulse control there, and then the the motor areas. Motor pathways, this is part of the somatic system. The descending areas, there's the direct pathways and the indirect pathways. The indirect pathways will allow a lot of integration of incoming proprioception, things like that. And so our complex areas that include the cerebellum, the substantia nigra and corpus striatum, and other regions there. Also in the somatic nervous system, you have the sensory areas where we can have our sensory perception. So this is where we talked about the sensory structures like the eye and the ear. Here we have a kind of a cross section of the eye. This is just showing how the eye works. By bending light, it focuses on the retina, so near and far vision. You have the structures like the cornea, the sclera, the retina, the lens, the ciliary body, things like that. There's the receptors. Here's a rod. Here's a cone. This just shows the stacked discs where you get the membrane. We have the photorecepting pigments. There's rhodopsin, consists of an enzyme opsin and a vitamin A portion retinol. Then that when light hits that, you get the dissociation and the enzyme becomes active and that stimulates a nerve cell. Here's the other really complex sensory organ, that's the inner ear. Here's sound waves being transmitted. They hit the tympanic membrane, then the 3 bones, and then the bones move in and out. That creates fluid vibrations in the ear. The receptor cells are in this inner ear portion, and depending on where they're vibrated, that determines the pitch. If it's over here, we hear it as high pitch. It's here, it's very low pitch, and these are just mechanoreceptors. Okay, here's the same mechanoreceptors, the hair cells, but here they are in the part of the vestibule. And if this thing moves, these things trigger nerve impulses in these parts of the vestibular nerve, and that determines our equilibrium. And so that's, the inner ear has not only hearing, but inner parts of it determine equilibrium. Okay, and so that was the vestibule. Here are the semicircular canals. And there's a fluid-filled tube. Okay. All right, then the autonomic part of the nervous system, another functional division, is another motor division, but this is different from the somatic division in that this is not, we don't have any conscious perception of this. So this controls visceral responses. And so it's part of the autonomic, or part of the peripheral nervous system that's motor, that's going to visceral organs. And so it's a slightly different system that's controlling smooth muscle and glands. There's 2 neurons outside the central nervous system, and they go to, there's a dual innervation to each organ. Each organ gets parasympathetic and sympathetic fibers. Parasympathetic promote normal homeostatic mechanisms like resting and digestion, things like that. They come from cranial nerves and sacral nerves. And there's a very long first neuron that goes to the ganglia that's right at the organ. So it's called the terminal ganglia. And these generally release acetylcholine at the organ. And they'll promote digestion, promote excretion, so you rest and digest. The other part of this division is the sympathetic response. Okay, and this comes from thoracic and lumbar spinal nerves. And then there's a short first neuron. So you have these chain ganglia or these paravertebral ganglia, and then you have a long second neuron, and that will release norepinephrine at the site of the organ. Okay, and so this promotes, it tends to shut down digestion and shut down excretion, and it gets you ready to respond to a dangerous situation. So it's the fight or flight response. So it kind of redirects everything to produce responses in skeletal muscle. It'll increase heart rate so that it'll make more blood available. It'll dilate the airways, things like that. So very important. These are visceral responses, And so there are some visceral reflexes that are handled by this thing. This is kind of controlled by primarily parts of the central nervous system that are beyond voluntary control. So this is like the hypothalamus and the medulla. These are the main control centers, and the hypothalamus is probably the main one. And so that's where control of autonomic system is happening. And so the hypothalamus is the overall control center. You have autonomic reflexes and reflex activity that's controlled that way. And so this can be stimulatory or inhibitory. So here's kind of the general picture. Okay, and then we did the neurological exam. Okay, mental status exam, cranial nerve exam, sensory exam, motor exam, and coordination gait exam. These are quick assessments to allow you to find out what's going wrong with the nervous system. Okay, one of the key things you're assessing is memory. And so we talked about improving memory and things that affect memory. Talked about dementia, causes of dementia, changes in memory, anterograde amnesia, retrograde amnesia, things like that. That's lots of different types of dementia. And so we have specific ways of assessing that in this exam. We also assess judgment areas, which are prefrontal areas and impulse control. And so you do this by questioning and ask them about things, and you can assess that type of stuff. Okay, that's a whole lot to go through fast. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. All right, so I'm thinking this is going to shut off very soon, so I'm going to stop, and on Friday I will go through the essay questions and talk a little bit about the practice exam. So I'm gonna stop the recording, and I'm gonna end the system unless anybody has any questions. Are people generally okay? Did you get that? You could hear things? Yes? Yes, Ariel? Okay. All right. So on same time on Friday, I'll do that. I'm gonna try and post this recording, so if you want to hear it again, you can hear it again, and so other people can hear it. But otherwise, I'm hoping to see some of you guys on Friday again. Remember, things open up on Monday for the final exam, and you have those quizzes that you can work on. And so, okay, let's see. All right, so I'm gonna end the material, and we'll end the time here. Maybe.